Greetings, Starfighters. Welcome to Mad Science Films. I'm Jimmy P, filmmaker and sexual astronaut. And as ever, I'm joined by my sinister co-host.
Sinister, who you've been talking to? James Morrissey, one half of the Mad Science Films team, back again. Yes, the man with no nickname, aka, I gotta change that, but never mind, it'll do for now. So, guys, before we crack on with the show, if you do like this video, then please hit that like button. If you've been enjoying the Mad Science content and want to subscribe to our channel and come stalk us on Facebook. If you have any comments or suggestions, then leave those comments in the comment section down below. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Ooh la la.
Yeah, ooh la la.
Please check out our fourth feature film for free on YouTube. Just search for Little Monster or click on the link in the show notes below. So this week, we're campaigning for a forgotten masterpiece of genre cinema to be given the exquisite Blu Ray treatment. This week is my choice, and I've gone for 2001's Suicide Club by Sion, Sono. Not quite sure if that's the pronunciation. Perhaps we'll go Welsh. Sion, Sono. So, the synopsis. A detective is trying to find the cause of a string of suicides.
Is that it?
Yeah. So, Jim, was this a first-time watch for you?
Yes, it was a first-time watch for moi. Yeah. I will say this, right? It starts off very strong. It definitely jumps straight into it. So, I mean, if you have any issues or wonderings about the title, it definitely is that.
It doesn't shy away from that, definitely.
Yeah, it did not at all. So it definitely jumps straight in. It looked quite cool. I mean, there was some, just a bit, there was a scene with the nurses and the camera's kind of floating around the ward. Very Halloween 2, that. And that was really kind of cool. And there was I like the overall grittiness to the story. It felt a bit like other films, which I'll perhaps recommend after. Quite gritty and moody, and I kind of liked the police officer with his family trying to work out these murders or these mass suicides and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of good tense thrills and a lot of good gore and stuff like that. Overall, though, as a story, I didn't quite, it wasn't as straightforward. It felt a bit abstract. It felt a bit, not straightforward. And it kind of frustrated me a little bit when I was watching it, because I felt if you just,
you got to the musical number at the end and went, is that it?
There was a lot of that.
Certainly to check that you hadn't missed something.
Yeah, there was some musical numbers, like all of a sudden this Japanese Bowie appears and starts singing about fucking because death shine all night long. I was like, you've lost me now, mate. This is fucking, so there was, again, you kind of find with Japanese cinema, Asian cinema, it does get a bit abstracty, and it can be a bit, I don't know whether this is influenced by any manga or anime, or I'm not sure if that's an element within it.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah, I don't know whether they were trying to incorporate something from that. Anyway, but I liked parts of it, but as a complete thing, it did piss me off. It did wind me up a little bit. Like, but there were some really cool scenes. Like, I love the whole rolled skin up. They're taking parts of skin and all that shit. Really graphic and kind of cool. And yeah.
No. I think, your criticisms are absolutely fair. So this is probably, after having watched it twice, this is probably about the fourth or fifth time I've seen it. First time I saw it was on VCD, back in the days of all the J-horror stuff coming out here, after Ringu, and like Pulse. I'd seen it, but beyond like the shock value, especially like the opening few scenes, it didn't really stay with me when I first saw it. But then also like Pulse, which is one of my recommendations, and I'll kind of talk about that a bit more later on. Upon kind of re-examining it now, I was appreciating it a lot more, what they were doing. And also, do you know what? There's some stuff that kind of ties back to what was happening in South Wales and in Bridgend in particular about 10 years ago, which kind of helped. Like, Jim, do you remember like about 10 years ago all the suicides happening in Bridgend?
Yeah.
And again, I mean, this was about 10 years before the film was about 10 years before that. But I think, there's some interesting comments that was true about Japan during
Yeah,
the early
yeah.
2000s. So, like, statistically, apparently the Japanese suicide rate among young people is much, much higher, significantly higher than other countries. Um, and there's a billion different reasons that have been thrown out there, but nothing has been confirmed as to why
Yeah.
that is the case. Um, like you said, Jim, I think that opening scene in the subway, that definitely stuck with me when I first saw it, and I think that is just like one of those scenes where it grabs you and it makes sure you're paying attention. So I think we'll kind of do a bit of spoilers. I mean, the opening scene is the opening scene, so but yeah, like 54 schoolgirls hold hands and jump in front of a subway train, and basically the entire subway is just bathed in blood. And that scene, just as a statement of intent to kind of get your attention, absolutely works. And then there's like follow-up scenes later on where they're talking about very much like the copycats, so the kids who don't appear to be part of this cult or whatever it is, just decide to commit suicide, and it's kind of peer pressure and stuff like that. Then yeah, there's all these theories thrown out there, and I think what you found frustrating, and definitely what I found frustrating the first couple of times I've seen it, was that the central mystery is never really answered, is it? It's satisfactory. It's not really explained why people are doing this, or if they're being made to do it, how they're being made to do it. And one of the questions they keep going through, the police kind of say is, okay, is this a murder case or not? And that question is asked about 3 or 4 times. Is this murder or is this suicide? And if it's not murder, then we shouldn't be investigating it. It's not for us to investigate. And I think that question is key to like the whole film, is the reasons for suicide. And I think going back to the point in Japan and the point in Bridgend is, there isn't one reason why somebody would commit suicide. And yes, there is a cult. Yes, there are these websites. Yes, there is this girl group of like preteens. Yes, there is that glam punk bands with a Bowie-esque singer. Either all of these are the reason or none of them are the reason. And I think one of the interesting things is later on in the film, when one of the younger detectives is on the phone to that kid who's got like that weird coughing breathing thing, and he keeps on saying there is no suicide club. And for me, and this is me perhaps reading into it incorrectly, for me what it is it's not a suicide. There is a cult, but it's not a suicide cult.
Which makes it even more alarming, isn't it? There's no one thing.
Exactly, definitely.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that's the case is because at the end, when the girl whose boyfriend committed suicide and kind of fell on her, the young detective grabs her hand and she looks at him like, I'm not going to kill myself. She's part of the cult, but she doesn't. So what I think is like the cult is much bigger than anybody can actually imagine, and only a small fraction of those people commit suicide. And again, when the older detective is on the phone and he's talking to somebody, and they're saying, do you feel connected to your family or whatever, and he doesn't, and that's shown by how he is with his kids and everything. And when the daughter comes down and she's covered in blood and he doesn't even look up and he just says, oh, I'm knackered, and the suicide's happening in his own house. He's a detective, but he didn't even detect what was going to happen. I think that's much more terrifying. And for me, the build-up was amazing, just in terms of almost like it felt like the end of the world, with all of these suicides happening in like gradually, exponentially getting bigger and bigger. There's that montage, isn't there, where there's cutting between like the 4 middle-aged women who hang themselves, the mum who's cutting vegetables and like the guys doing stand-up and slit their throats, the street food cook who overdoses on pills, and that all happens in quick succession. And it felt like apocalyptic. It felt like end of world times, and I just loved that whole experience. I agree. I think it doesn't quite wrap itself up narratively. And I remember when I started watching it again to review it, that last musical number from the girl group, I was like, well, have I missed the explanation here? What went on with that? And again, I think we got to get into spoilers. but I think that's part and parcel of it. Is you're given all these things like the little kids, and they're seeming to say things that are beyond their years or whatever. I don't think there's one reason for suicide, and I think that's the main point. Is everybody's motivated by to commit suicide for different reasons, like those school kids just jumping off because they think it's the cool thing to do. And yeah, that completely landed for me, and I absolutely loved it.
Do you think there's a social commentary? It's more specifically to do with like the internet and technology, because don't forget 2001 is start coming into mainstream, everybody using emails and websites. What is it? There's a curiosity, there's a misunderstanding, therefore it becomes a suspect in this whole.
I think if anything, it's a criticism of that thought. So I think the director is criticizing that stance, because I think that would have been a popular theory at the time of at the early 2000s, people saying, oh, it's because everybody's not socializing anymore, and they're chatting and everything like that. And I suspect the reason that the director throws up all of these different theories is to kind of say, we don't know, suicide existed before the internet, and it will exist after the internet and all of that. So I think you're right, but I think it's a critique of that. And yeah, I mean, looking at the time period, you've got Ringu, you've got Pulse, this is Japan and horror dealing with technology. Ringu, watching the VHS tape, and 7 days later you drop dead, and Pulse, Shutter, again, something in the frame of a camera, a soul being captured and all that. So yeah, I think J-horror was doing a lot of that, but I think the director was actually critiquing all of that and just saying, no, all of this fears and stuff like that is much deeper than that and goes much beyond that. One other thing I really dug, and I think it's going to the point that you were saying about it being gritty, was it felt very much like a police procedural. For a big chunk of the film, we're following these detectives, and they're trying to follow it out. And I love the fact that especially like the first 2/3 of the film only seems to take place over 3 days. You've got the title cards going, May 26th, May 27th. To me, that's great, and I love it when films do that. The original Halloween, has the dates, counting down to Halloween. So I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't think the ending lands entirely. It also helps that I've seen the thematic sequel to this.
I just think for me, it's I don't mind a story that doesn't nail and go, right, well, this is what it's all about. I don't mind that. I don't mind a bit of vague, fill in the blanks yourself kind of thing. I get all that. I just thought that there was some scenes which didn't really, I just don't know why they were there for, like the whole singing song thing. Like, I just don't. What
I will say is, I think the glam punk thing went on too long. That Bowie-esque singer where he's like stomping on pets and stuff like that. I think that's a cool image, but I think that detracted away too much from the main plot, and they stayed with that too long. I think if it was shorter and they trimmed that bit down and had it, gave it as much weight as the girl group, and trying to figure out the number for the code and then ringing it and keeping it to that, then great. Because I think what the Genesis, the Bowie-esque singer, was saying, and the reason he was taking credit for it all, I think that's interesting. And again, it's the idea of rock and roll corrupts our youth. So I think it's interesting, but I think
it also taps into that kind of online presence, isn't it? Like, becoming famous, becoming something, even if it's not something good, and even if it's something which you can't take responsibility for.
And if anything, I mean, that's early to be doing that. You think 2000?
Well, you got to give credit there.
I agree. It's not perfect. I think it could do with a bit of a trim. As I say, I've seen the thematic sequel, which does help, and apparently there was always supposed to be a part 3 to this, so it's meant to be part of a suicide trilogy. So maybe if he ever gets around to making it, it'll all wrap up nicely with a bow, and people will be able to reevaluate the first one. But for me, it's another one of those imperfect films which just asks loads of really interesting questions, a failed experiment, and I kind of like those. That seems
I just think the film and for myself, I think I had more questions than answers when I watched it, which I'm okay with. If I feel like that's how I'm supposed to take away from the film, is to have some questions and ponderings about all these kind of different social issues or whatever else.
And also, Jim, I mean, I've seen it about 3 times more than you as well. So, you know, I think
again, feel good then that you're still pondering too.
Yeah. I think there's that usual thing though, isn't there? Like you were saying last week, you know, like, you know, when you're rewatching a film, you're picking up more stuff each and every time.
Yeah,
there were bits there were connections there I was making when reviewing the show this time that I probably didn't pick up the first kind of time, which is probably why it didn't stick in my head. So anyway, Jim, having said all of that, who do you think is best placed to put this bad boy out?
Well, that's a tricky one, this one. It wasn't as straightforward trying to find a place. I could go the usual Arrow, whatever, and probably would actually. But I did come across Third Window Films. They do a lot of Asian cinema, a lot of
closely linked with Arrow as well. So yeah, good.
Oh, there we go. So that's the only one I've got, though, I'm afraid. So
that's
a good place, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've gone with them, but in addition, I also picked up Eureka. So they've also recently started putting out a lot of Asian horror, Asian sci-fi stuff as well. I think they'll be really well placed. Arrow, kind of, only because they've also put out one of my recommendations, and I think they go along nicely. But yeah, any of those guys, I think, would do a really good job, and could put out a good box set as well. With one of my recommendations. So Jim, if you don't mind, I'm going to hop straight into my recommendations.
Absolutely, go for it.
To you. So yeah, I think also what would be useful for people is if they could get the thematic prequel, sequel set in the same universe, Norikos Dinner Table. So this is less hardcore horror and more family drama, and it kind of more explores that weird alienation sense that is given, like, you know, as much of a reason for the suicides as anything else. So I think that Noriko's Dinner Table would be a good little companion piece to have. And hopefully, you know, it would also encourage the director to get around to doing part 3. I mentioned it earlier in the show, but I think Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Pulse is another great one. That's out by Arrow. That's more of a sci-fi kind of thing, but it came out in the same period. And again, it kind of looks at technology and strange things happening. And in the same way, it kind of jumps from characters to characters. So that's a good companion piece. And another one by the same director, Cure, which is more of a serial killer kind of thing, but again, has these weird abstract reasons for it. So Jim, you might not get on with this either, but I think if you dug this film, then Cure would be a good way to go as well. So Jim, what recommendations have you got, mate?
Well, I've got more mainstream kind of known films, I guess. But yeah, if you do like that kind of messed up, people just killing themselves and crazy shit going on, you might want to check out The Happening. That was very, very messed up. Same kind of vibe. It's almost like a cold dread. Do you know what I mean? Also gone for gritty films. You want to continue on with this cop, gritty, dark world, really messed up kind of crime scenes. You might want to dig Seven, starring Mr. Pitt and Mr. Morgan Freeman. Yeah, that's some really good gritty kind of policing. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. Yeah, no, that would be a good double bill. So yeah, okay, guys, what about you? Have you guys seen Suicide Club? Did you guys dig it? Let us know in the comments. Are there any other films that you think would go well on a double bill with Suicide Club, or just any other films that you think we should check out that deserve a Blu-ray release? Let us know in the comments. And then, Jim, what else could these people do?
So guys, yes, remember, if you do like this video, hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. Stay tuned for more. Come over to Facebook and like us there too. Until next time, goodbye.